Today we're going to be making Xiao Long Bao, which is also commonly known as a soup dumpling. For these dumplings we're going to use pork belly. Pork belly is perfect because it has a great fat to meat ratio. We're going to start by cutting our pork in half and cutting off the skin. For anyone that was wondering, the soup dumplings are not actually filled with soup. The soup that comes out when you bite into a dumpling is actually cooked pork jelly. As unappetizing as that sounds, if you've ever had a soup dumpling, you know just how delicious it is. After you finish with your pork, we're going to chop up some scallions and ginger. To prepare your scallions, chop off the ends and peel off any wilted portions. Then chop it up into several equal sections. Move your scallions into a bowl and save them for later. Next, you're going to peel and chop your ginger. I found the easiest way to do this is to use a spoon. It's much safer than using a knife, and you end up saving a lot more of the root than you would if you chop off a lot of the skin. Now it's time to make our pork broth, which will then turn into our pork jelly, also known as the aspic. Put 4 cups of water into a large pot. For this, I'm using an 8-quart Dutch oven. Put the pork skin that you just cut off your pork belly into the pot, followed by the ginger slices that you cut, and then the scallion. We're going to add a tablespoon of Chinese cooking wine, which will help extract the collagen from the pork skin, helping us make our jelly. For some flavor, we're going to add some light soy sauce. This soy sauce is a little harder to find. Usually you can only find it in your Asian supermarkets, but it has a little bit of a subtler taste than your typical Kikkoman soy sauce. Stir everything in the pot and allow it to come to a full boil. Once it starts boiling, you're going to want to reduce the heat so your pot can simmer. You're going to cover it up and allow it to cook for another 2 to 3 hours. Cooking it for this long will extract all the flavor from the pork scallion and ginger, allowing your pork jelly to be extremely flavorful. Once you pull off the lid, you'll notice the broth is much cloudier than it was before. That means all the flavor was extracted from everything you put in there. Before you transfer the broth to a different container, you're going to want to fish out all the things you placed in it. Removing all this will give you a better chance at creating a nice clear pork jelly. After you're done straining your broth, transfer it into a heat-resistant container such as a Pyrex. Make sure if you missed anything like I did and it gets into your broth that you fish it out before you transfer it to the fridge. Cover your container and put it in the fridge overnight. By morning you should have a nice pork jelly. If your mixture didn't solidify like mine did, you can always add some gelatin to it. The reason it ends up not solidifying sometimes is the pork skin might not have had enough collagen. For each pound of pork you need 1 cup of this pork jelly in order to make the dumplings. Scoop out a cup of it and leave it in the fridge so it doesn't liquefy. You're going to need it later. Now pull out your food processor. You pretty much need a meat paste in order to make these dumplings. In order to do that, you can either buy minced pork or you can use one of these. If you use the food processor to mince your meat, you're going to need to scrape down the edges about halfway in order to make sure the entire mixture is uniform. Scrape down the edges and pulse until the mixture is fully uniform. You don't want any big chunks in your dumplings because they might not fully cook through. That would completely ruin the Xiao Long Bao experience. Now it's time to actually make the dumpling mixture. Transfer your meat to a bowl and add the following spices. Next, add the following liquids which will help give it its unique flavor. Lastly, you're going to add some minced scallion and ginger to your mixture. Use your hands to make sure your dumpling mixture is uniform. Using a spoon or other tools usually doesn't work as well. Now it's time to add the pork jelly that we worked so hard to make. Add the jelly to your dumpling mixture and gently fold it in with your hands until it's fully uniform. Once it's all uniform, it's time to pull out the dumplings and start folding. Typically I would make these by hand, but for this time I use pre-made dumpling wraps that can be found at your Asian markets. It's important that you get the meat to dumpling ratio perfect for these. If you don't have enough meat in there, not only will your dumplings not taste great, but it will be really hard for them to fold. The first fold is the hardest part, but once you have that done, essentially what you're going to do is pinch with your right hand and tuck the dumpling meat under as you feed dumpling skin to your right hand with your left. As you work your way around the dumpling, you'll notice that you're essentially making a little pouch for the meat. While these folds aren't super crucial to the actual integrity of the dumpling, they are really important if you want to call this a Xiao Long Bao. After you seal up the dumpling, make sure you give it a nice little twist so it doesn't come apart. There you go. To cook our dumplings, we're going to use bamboo steamers, which all dim sum restaurants use. How they work is there are holes on the bottom which allow steam to pass through and cook food. Boil some water over a wok or a pot and place your steamer on top. As I mentioned before, the steam will pass through the holes of the steamer and allow your dumplings to cook. In about 8 to 10 minutes, your dumplings will be perfect and ready. After 8 to 10 minutes, lift off your steamer and make sure to pick up your dumplings with a pair of chopsticks. You don't want to puncture them and release all the tasty soup you worked so hard to create. The best sauce to have with your Xiao Long Bao is black Chinese vinegar. It's a lot more mild than typical white vinegar, and it gives a nice balance to the sweet pork meat. I hope you enjoy your Xiao Long Bao.